The research station Horizon 7 hummed like a delicate glass sculpture against the infinite darkness of space. Its 17 research decks hummed with the quiet intensity of scientific discovery, a testament to human curiosity and technological achievement. Dr. Marcus Chen hardly noticed the station's beauty anymore. For him, it was simply home. A workplace where the boundaries of human knowledge were pushed centimetre by centimetre. At precisely 6:47 hours, Marcus entered Laboratory Delta 9, his favourite workspace. The room was a controlled chaos of holographic displays, quantum computing banks, and experimental denobiological analysis equipment. Scattered notes covered his primary workstation, a complex web of research connecting interstellar microbial evolution, quantum communication principles, and adaptive biological systems. He didn't hear her approach. The Chrysalian diplomatic envoy moved with an almost imperceptible grace, her crystalline form refracting the soft blue light of the laboratory in mesmerizing patterns. Zarlin had been observing Marcus for weeks, studying every minute detail of his work, his interactions, his entire approach to scientific exploration. "You have not slept in 37 standard hours," she stated matter-of-factly. Marcus jumped, nearly knocking over a delicate holographic model of cellular communication networks. He turned, surprised by the sudden presence of the alien diplomat. Zarlin stood perfectly still, her body a complex lattice of translucent crystals that seemed to breathe with an internal light. "Excuse me." Marcus adjusted his glasses, trying to regain his composure. The universal translator embedded in the station's communication system rendered her words with perfect clarity. Each syllable carried a musical quality that seemed to vibrate with additional layers of meaning. "Your current research trajectory suggests a significant breakthrough. However, your biological efficiency is compromised by prolonged cognitive engagement without rest." It was not a question, nor precisely a concern. It was an observation, clinical, yet somehow warm. Marcus couldn't help but smile. Most humans would have found the statement intrusive, but to him, it was simply another fascinating data point. "I'm close to something," he explained, turning back to his holographic displays. "These microbial communication patterns we've discovered in the Kepler 452-bit samples, they're not random. There's a complex adaptive system here that could revolutionize our understanding of biological intelligence." Zarlin moved closer, her crystalline form shifting colors, a subtle dance of blues, silvers, and soft greens that Marcus would later learn was a complex emotional language. "Interesting," she murmured. "Most biological researchers would focus on classification. You are seeking understanding." The distinction was subtle but profound. Marcus realized he was being studied as much as he was studying. The Chrysalian Diplomatic Corps was known for its meticulous approach to interspecies communication. They didn't just exchange information, they sought to comprehend the fundamental nature of intelligent systems. "I'm Marcus Chen," he offered, realizing he hadn't formally introduced himself. "Zarlin of the 7th Harmonic Diplomatic Alignment," she responded. Her form rippled slightly, a gesture that might have been equivalent to a human smile. "Your work suggests you view biological systems as dynamic, adaptive networks, rather than static collections of organisms." It was both an observation and a challenge. Marcus recognized the invitation for what it was, an intellectual engagement that transcended typical diplomatic protocols. The research station suddenly felt different. The endless darkness of space outside seemed to pulse with unexpected potential. He didn't know it then, but this moment marked the beginning of something extraordinary. A courtship would unfold, not through traditional human or Chrysalian rituals, but through a series of intellectual and emotional challenges that would reshape both of their understanding of intelligence, partnership, and the vast, mysterious universe they both sought to understand. Zarlin continued to study him, her crystalline form catching the laboratory's soft light. Marcus returned to his research, acutely aware of the alien observer. Something had changed, though he couldn't quite define what. The first challenge had already begun. The next morning, Marcus found an unusual data packet waiting in his personal research queue. At first glance, it appeared to be a standard xenobiological research proposal. But something about its complexity caught his attention immediately. The document was a meticulously crafted simulation, far beyond a typical research challenge. Intricate quantum algorithms intertwined with biological data in patterns that seemed to dance at the edge of comprehension. Marcus realized this was no ordinary research request. It was a test. In the station's communal research hub, holographic displays flickered with data streams from multiple scientific disciplines. Researchers from a dozen different species worked side by side, a testament to interstellar cooperation. Zarlin stood nearby, her crystalline form reflecting the soft ambient light, watching Marcus with an intensity that felt almost tangible. "An interesting problem set," she said, materializing beside him. Marcus looked up, surprised by her sudden appearance. "You call this a problem set? It's more like a multi-dimensional puzzle that defies standard computational approaches." The simulation before him explored the potential communication networks of a previously unknown microbial ecosystem. But it wasn't just a scientific challenge. Each layer of the problem contained subtle variations that seemed to test not just scientific knowledge, but creative problem-solving, emotional intelligence, and adaptive thinking. Zarlin's translation device rendered her explanation with musical precision. "In my culture, potential partners demonstrate compatibility through comprehensive challenges. This is but the first of many." Marcus began to understand. This wasn't a research proposal. It was a courtship ritual. Chrysilian culture viewed partnership as the ultimate collaborative endeavor. Compatibility wasn't measured by physical attraction or emotional connection, but by the ability to solve complex problems together, to challenge and complement each other's intellectual capabilities. The first simulation required Marcus to develop a communication protocol for a hypothetical microbial network that exhibited quantum entanglement properties. Most researchers would approach this linearly, breaking down the problem into manageable components. But Marcus saw something different. He recognized the network structure as similar to neural communication patterns he'd studied in advanced artificial intelligence systems. Instead of treating the microbial network as a static system, he began to map its potential for adaptive communication. Hours passed. The research hub gradually emptied. Other scientists gave Marcus curious glances, wondering about the complex holographic models he was constructing. Zarlin remained motionless, her crystalline form subtly changing colors, a language of emotional response that few humans could interpret. "You're not solving the problem," Zarlin observed. "You're reimagining its fundamental nature." Marcus looked up, a spark of excitement in his eyes. "Isn't that the point of scientific discovery? We don't just answer questions, we expand the realm of what's possible." The simulation began to respond to his approach. Quantum pathways that seemed impossibly complex started to align, creating communication models that no previous research had conceived. It wasn't just a solution, it was a breakthrough that challenged existing understanding of biological communication. Zarlin's form pulsed with a color Marcus would later learn represented profound intellectual respect. "Remarkable," she murmured. Most species would attempt to control the network. You seek to understand its inherent potential. As the final computational models resolved, Marcus realized this was more than a scientific challenge. It was a first step in a courtship process that would challenge everything he understood about intelligence, partnership, and the vast potential of interspecies collaboration. The research station's artificial day cycle began to shift, soft lights mimicking a distant sun's rise. Marcus sat back, both exhausted and exhilarated. The first challenge was complete, but he sensed this was just the beginning. Zarlin's crystalline form caught the emerging light, a complex prism of possibility. Adequate performance, she said, the hint of what might have been a smile resonating in her translated words. Shall we proceed to the next challenge? Marcus couldn't help but grin. Absolutely. The dance of courtship had truly begun. The holographic simulation materialized with stunning complexity. Horizon 7's advanced projection systems transformed the research chamber into a three-dimensional representation of an alien star system on the brink of catastrophic conflict. Marcus stood at the center of a swirling maelstrom of diplomatic tension, with Zarlin observing silently from the periphery. Two civilizations flickered into existence. The Vornax, a technologically advanced species with a militaristic culture, occupied one side of the holographic space. Their ship designs were angular, bristling with weapon systems that suggested centuries of conflict. Opposite them, the Lyrian collective appeared more organic, their vessels resembling complex biological structures that seemed to breathe and pulse with internal energy. A timestamp appeared, 72 standard hours until projected conflict initiation. Zarlin's voice cut through the simulation's ambient sounds. The parameters are clear. Prevent total destruction while maintaining the fundamental cultural integrity of both civilizations. Marcus understood this was more than a simple diplomatic exercise. It was a comprehensive test of problem-solving, cultural understanding, and creative thinking. Most diplomatic approaches would involve negotiation, compromise, or show of force. But Marcus saw something deeper. He began by analyzing the communication logs between the two civilizations. The Vornax believed the Lyrian collective was preparing a technological invasion. The Lyrians viewed the Vornax as paranoid isolationists threatening their exploration rights. Beneath the surface conflict lay a fundamental misunderstanding. The simulation tracked his every move. Holographic data streams cascaded around him, each decision creating ripple effects across the potential conflict scenario. Marcus noticed a subtle quantum communication frequency buried in the background radiation of the star system. It was nearly invisible, a communication channel that both civilizations were unconsciously using but couldn't comprehend. Most researchers would have overlooked it entirely. Interesting, he muttered, fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. The quantum frequency wasn't just a communication channel. It was a shared evolutionary marker, evidence that both civilizations had a common genetic origin thousands of stellar cycles ago. This wasn't just information, it was a potential bridge of understanding. Marcus began constructing a translation matrix that could interpret this quantum communication layer. It required reimagining language itself, not as a set of words, but as a complex network of shared experiences and evolutionary memory. Zarlin's crystalline form shifted colors, reflecting intense curiosity. The Chrysilian watched as Marcus approached the problem from an angle she had not anticipated. 12 hours into the simulation, Marcus transmitted a carefully constructed message using the quantum frequency. It wasn't a diplomatic statement or a threat. Instead, It was a complex mathematical representation of shared genetic history, cultural memory, and potential collaborative futures. The simulation's parameters began to shift. The Vornax vessels, initially powered for combat, showed signs of reduced weapon charging. The Lyrian ships adjusted their defensive formations. Something fundamental was changing in their understanding of each other. "You are not solving the conflict," Zarolin observed. "You are revealing a deeper connection." Marcus smiled. Conflict often emerges from fear of the unknown. Understanding is the most powerful weapon of all. As the simulation entered its final hours, the two civilizations began preliminary cultural exchange protocols. They weren't just avoiding war, they were discovering a profound connection that had been hidden for generations. The holographic display dissolved, leaving Marcus and Zarolin alone in the research chamber. Her crystalline form pulsed with a color he was beginning to recognize as intellectual excitement. The traditional diplomatic approach would have involved negotiation or potential military intervention, Zarolin said. You chose to reveal understanding. Marcus shrugged. Sometimes the most complex problems require the most simple solution, seeing each other's humanity, or in this case, their fundamental shared existence. The first trial was complete, but both knew this was just the beginning of a much more complex journey of mutual discovery. Zarolin's form shifted, catching the laboratory's soft light. "Shall we proceed?" she asked. Marcus grinned. Absolutely. The next challenge arrived without warning. Marcus found himself in a holographic environment that defied traditional scientific classification. Landscapes morphed and shifted, blending quantum mechanics with philosophical thought experiments. Zarolin watched, her crystalline form a constant presence at the edge of his perception. Perception is more than observation, she announced. It is the fundamental act of creation. The environment around Marcus began to respond to his thoughts. Quantum probability waves materialized as colored threads, weaving through complex geometric patterns. Mathematical equations danced like living entities, their solutions branching into multiple potential realities. This was no ordinary research simulation. It was a comprehensive test of cognitive flexibility, emotional intelligence, and the ability to perceive beyond established scientific paradigms. Marcus recognized the challenge for what it was, a deep exploration of consciousness itself. The Chrysilian approach to understanding intelligence went far beyond human scientific methodologies. Where human researchers sought to categorize and define, Zarolin's civilization sought to comprehend the fluid nature of perception and potential. His first approach was analytical. Marcus began mapping the relationship between thought, observation, and molecular probability. But the simulation resisted linear thinking. Each time he attempted to categorize, the environment would shift, revealing new layers of complexity. A memory surfaced, his grandmother's stories about indigenous knowledge systems that viewed reality as an interconnected web of relationships rather than discrete objects. Marcus realized traditional scientific methodology was just one way of understanding the universe. The holographic environment responded to this moment of insight. Quantum threads began to align in more complex patterns, revealing intricate connections that transcended traditional dimensional understanding. Fascinating, Zarolin murmured. Her crystalline form refracted light in patterns that seemed to mirror the simulation's changing landscape. Most researchers attempt to control the environment. You are listening to it. Marcus understood this was more than an intellectual exercise. It was a profound exploration of how different intelligent systems perceive and interact with reality. The Chrysilian approach to partnership was fundamentally about mutual understanding, not just of each other, but of the universe itself. The simulation introduced emotional complexity. Quantum threads began to represent not just mathematical probabilities, but emotional states. Joy, curiosity, uncertainty. These became tangible structures that Marcus could manipulate and understand. He realized the challenge was teaching him to see beyond human limitations. Perception wasn't just about collecting data, it was about creating possibility. Hours passed, though time seemed meaningless in this quantum landscape. Marcus developed new ways of processing information, learning to read the subtle interactions between thought, emotion, and physical potential. The holographic environment became a living dialogue, responding to his growing understanding. Zaralyn remained a silent observer, her form subtly changing colors that represented layers of intellectual and emotional response. This was more than a test. It was a profound act of cultural exchange. "Your species has a remarkable capacity for adaptive thinking," she observed. Most civilizations become locked in their established perceptual frameworks. Humans continuously challenge their own understanding. The simulation began to resolve, not with a definitive conclusion, but with an expanding network of potential interpretations. Marcus had not solved the problem. He had expanded the very concept of problem-solving. As the holographic environment dissolved, Marcus felt fundamentally changed. He had glimpsed a way of understanding that transcended human scientific methodology. The boundaries between observer and observed, between thought and reality, had become beautifully blurred. Zaralyn approached, her crystalline form catching the soft laboratory light. "The next challenge awaits," she said, a hint of anticipation in her translated words. Marcus smiled, understanding that this was far more than a series of tests. It was a journey of mutual discovery, a dance of intelligence that challenged everything he thought he knew about consciousness, perception, and connection. "I'm ready," he responded. The courtship continued, each challenge revealing new layers of possibility. The emergency alert system of Horizon 7 erupted with a sound that cut through every research deck and diplomatic corridor. Holographic displays flickered to life, showing a complex interstellar conflict that threatened to destabilize 3 major galactic sectors. The Centauri Concordance, a delicate diplomatic network spanning 17 intelligent species, teetered on the brink of total collapse. Ancient territorial disputes, economic tensions, and deeply rooted cultural misunderstandings had converged into a perfect storm of potential destruction. Marcus found himself in the station's primary diplomatic coordination center. Zaralyn stood beside him, her crystalline form reflecting the urgent holographic displays that showed multiple fleet movements, communication breakdowns, and escalating tensions. "This is not a simulation," she stated. The translation device caught the precise blend of concern and analytical focus in her voice. Diplomatic representatives from various species filled the room. Holographic projections showed tense negotiation attempts that had failed repeatedly. Traditional diplomatic approaches had reached a complete impasse. Economic sanctions, military posturing, and centuries of accumulated grievances created a complex web of conflict that seemed impossible to untangle. Marcus studied the data streams. Most observers saw a conflict. He saw a complex system of misunderstood relationships, communication failures, and deeply buried shared histories. The primary points of conflict centered on resource distribution in the Orion 9 sector. The Vornax claimed historical mining rights. The Lyrian Collective argued for ecological preservation. The Centaur Hub wanted economic stability. Each perspective seemed irreconcilable. "We need a different approach," Marcus muttered, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. Zarlin watched carefully. This was no longer a courtship challenge. This was a real-world test of interstellar diplomacy that could result in millions of lives lost. Marcus began to reconstruct the conflict's historical data. He wasn't looking for diplomatic solutions. He was seeking underlying patterns of connection. Most diplomatic approaches focused on individual grievances. Marcus looked for systemic relationships. A breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source. Deep in the historical archives, Marcus discovered a shared genetic marker among 3 of the most conflicting species. It was more than a biological coincidence. It suggested a common evolutionary origin that had been forgotten through centuries of conflict. "Look," he said, projecting a complex holographic model that showed intricate genetic connections. "They're not just fighting, they're fighting themselves." The diplomatic representatives fell silent. Marcus's presentation revealed something profound. The conflict wasn't about resources or territory. It was about deep-seated cultural trauma, misunderstood history, and a fundamental lack of understanding. Zarlin's crystalline form pulsed with a color Marcus now recognized as intellectual excitement. "You are not solving the conflict," she observed. "You are revealing a deeper connection." Marcus developed a communication protocol that went beyond traditional diplomatic language. It wasn't about compromise. It was about shared understanding. He used quantum communication principles to create a translation matrix that could communicate not just words, but collective emotional and historical context. The first transmission went out. Holographic displays showed immediate changes in fleet movements. Communication channels that had been dead for centuries began to show activity. Representatives from different species looked at each other with something new in their eyes. Understanding was replacing centuries of fear and misunderstanding. "Remarkable," Zarlin said. Our translation device caught a nuanced emotion that was close to respect, admiration, and something deeper. As the diplomatic crisis began to resolve, Marcus realized this was more than a professional achievement. It was a profound demonstration of human potential, the ability to see connections where others saw only conflict. The Centauri concordance would never be the same. Neither would the understanding between species. Zarlin approached Marcus, her crystalline form catching the soft light of the diplomatic center. "Shall we proceed?" she asked. Marcus smiled. "Always." The courtship continued, each challenge revealing new layers of human potential. The research chamber transformed into a landscape of impossible geometry. Crystalline pathways twisted through dimensional spaces that defied human perception. Zarlin stood at the center, her form both a physical presence and an abstract concept of intelligence. "The final challenge awaits," she announced, her voice resonating through multiple layers of reality. Marcus understood this was more than an intellectual test. It was a comprehensive examination of ethical reasoning, adaptive thinking, and the fundamental nature of decision-making. The scenario materialized around him, a complex moral and philosophical dilemma that would push the boundaries of his understanding. A holographic projection revealed 3 distinct scenarios, each more complex than the last. In the first, a colony of sentient beings faced an existential threat. Limited resources could save only a portion of the population. Traditional problem-solving would demand a cold, calculated approach, maximize survival through ruthless selection. But Marcus saw something deeper. He began to analyze the interconnections between the colony's social structures, biological systems, and collective potential. Each individual wasn't just a data point. They were a complex network of relationships, potential, and unexplored possibilities. The second scenario emerged. A technological breakthrough could solve the resource crisis, but it would fundamentally alter the colony's existing social and biological structure. Most researchers would present a binary choice: preservation or transformation. Marcus started to map alternative pathways. Zarlin's crystalline form shifted, reflecting subtle changes in the simulation's parameters. She was not just observing. She was challenging every fundamental assumption about problem-solving and ethical reasoning. The third scenario pushed the challenge to its most profound level. The colony's survival depended on a decision that would require sacrificing individual potential for collective survival. But Marcus recognized that collective survival wasn't just about numbers. It was about preserving the potential for growth, creativity, and unexpected solutions. Hours passed. The simulation became a living dialogue between Marcus's approach and the challenge's complex parameters. He wasn't trying to solve the problem. He was expanding the very concept of problem solving. Traditional approaches would create a hierarchy of survival. Marcus developed a dynamic system that allowed for individual adaptation, collective support, and continuous evolution. His solution wasn't about choosing who would survive. It was about creating a framework where survival itself became a collaborative, adaptive process. The holographic environment began to respond to this thinking. Potential pathways materialized, not as fixed routes, but as dynamic networks of possibility. Each decision created multiple potential futures, each future containing seeds of further potential. Fascinating, Zarlin observed. Her translation device caught the nuanced blend of intellectual excitement and profound respect. Marcus had transformed the challenge from a test of survival to an exploration of collective potential. The colony wouldn't just survive. It would discover new ways of existing, of understanding itself, of evolving. The simulation's parameters began to shift. What had started as a dire scenario of limited resources and potential extinction became a blueprint for adaptive civilization-level problem-solving. Zarlin approached, her crystalline form catching the soft light of the research chamber. Most species would seek to control the outcome, she said. You have created a system of continuous potential. Marcus smiled. Survival isn't about preservation. It's about the capacity to grow, to adapt, to discover. The final challenge dissolved, leaving behind a profound sense of possibility. Marcus had not just solved a problem. He had demonstrated a fundamentally different approach to understanding collective intelligence. The courtship continues, Zarlin announced, her form pulsing with a colour that suggested deep intellectual excitement. Marcus felt transformed. Each challenge had revealed new layers of human potential, new ways of perceiving intelligence, connection, and possibility. I'm ready, he responded. The next challenge awaited. The Chrysalian diplomatic complex materialized around Marcus, a breathtaking structure of living crystal that seemed to breathe with its own intelligence. Zarlin stood beside him, her form both familiar and utterly alien. This was no longer just a series of challenges. This was the final stage of their extraordinary courtship. Holographic displays surrounded them, showing the intricate cultural history of the Chrysalian civilization. Thousands of stellar cycles of development, philosophical evolution, and technological advancement played out in rapid succession. Marcus understood this was more than a presentation. It was an invitation to complete cultural exchange. The Chrysalian approach to partnership transcended human concepts of marriage or long-term commitment. This was a comprehensive merging of intellectual and cultural potential. Marcus would be asked to make a choice that would fundamentally alter his understanding of identity, potential, and connection. Zarlin's crystalline form pulsed with complex color patterns. Most species view partnership as a limitation, she explained. We see it as expansion. The cultural exchange began. Marcus experienced generations of Chrysalian history, not through traditional historical records, but through a profound neural connection that allowed direct experiential understanding. He lived through moments of scientific discovery, cultural transformation, and collective growth. He saw how the Chrysalian civilization approached challenges differently. Where humans often competed, they collaborated. Where human societies created hierarchies, Chrysalians developed dynamic, adaptive networks of mutual support and discovery. But this was no one-sided presentation. The neural connection worked both ways. Zarlin began to experience human history, the struggles, the failures, the moments of extraordinary triumph. She witnessed humanity's capacity for resilience, creativity, and unexpected problem-solving. The most profound moments came from unexpected sources. A child's moment of kindness during a global crisis. A scientist's breakthrough born from pure curiosity. An artist's ability to reimagine possibility. "Your species is beautifully chaotic," Zarlin observed. Her translation device caught the nuanced blend of admiration and fascination. The final proposal emerged. This was more than a personal choice. It was an opportunity to create something entirely new, a partnership that could potentially transform how intelligent species understood collaboration. Marcus would be offered full cultural integration. This meant more than learning Chrysalian language or customs. It meant a fundamental reimagining of his own potential. He could merge his human perspective with Chrysalian understanding, creating a new form of intelligence that transcended individual species limitations. The complexity of the offer was staggering. Most humans would be overwhelmed. Marcus saw possibility. Holographic displays showed potential futures. Some were breathtaking in their potential for discovery. Others revealed the profound challenges of such a comprehensive cultural exchange. Marcus wasn't just seeing options. He was experiencing potential realities. Zarlin waited. This was a choice that could not be rushed. The neural connection allowed Marcus to fully comprehend the depth of the offer. He wasn't just being asked to join a civilization. He was being invited to expand the very concept of intelligent collaboration. Hours passed, or perhaps moments. Time became fluid in this space of cultural exchange. Marcus began to understand that this was about more than personal choice. It was about the potential for different intelligent species to grow together, to challenge each other's understanding, to create something more than the sum of their individual parts. Most would see this as a loss of individual identity, Zarlin said. We see it as the ultimate expression of individual potential. The final moment of decision approached. Marcus felt the weight of possibility, not as a burden, but as an extraordinary opportunity. Zarlin's crystalline form caught the soft light of the diplomatic complex. Her entire being seemed to vibrate with anticipation, with the profound potential of what could be. "Are you ready?" she asked. Marcus smiled, a smile that contained generations of human curiosity, of the desire to explore, to understand, to grow. "Always," he responded. The universe held its breath. The moment of transformation defied traditional description. Marcus and Zarlin existed simultaneously as individual entities and as something entirely new, a collaborative intelligence that transcended species boundaries. Horizon 7 Research Station became the epicenter of a fundamental shift in galactic understanding. Other species watched in a mixture of fascination, confusion, and profound curiosity. What had begun as an unusual courtship had become something far more significant, a living demonstration of collaborative potential. Their first joint research project sent shockwaves through scientific communities across multiple star systems. By combining human creativity with Chrysallian systematic thinking, they developed communication protocols that could bridge gaps between civilizations that had been isolated for millennia. The neural network they created was unlike anything previously conceived. It wasn't just a method of communication. It was a living, adaptive system that could translate not just words, but entire cultural contexts, emotional nuances, and complex philosophical concepts. Scientific conferences became something entirely different. Where previous presentations had been about sharing information, Marcus and Zarelin demonstrated a new approach to knowledge exchange. They didn't just present findings. They created collaborative experiences that allowed other researchers to directly understand the depth of their discoveries. Their work challenged fundamental assumptions about intelligence, communication, and potential. The Centauri Concordance, which had previously been a fragile diplomatic network, began to transform. Species that had been in conflict for generations started to find new ways of understanding each other. "We are not solving problems," Zarelin would explain during their presentations. "We are expanding the very concept of problem solving." Marcus brought a uniquely human element to their collaborative intelligence. Where Chrysallian thinking was systematic and precise, he introduced elements of creativity, emotional intelligence, and unexpected approaches. He showed that the most profound solutions often came from the ability to see beyond established patterns. Their neural network became a living testament to the power of collaborative intelligence. It could adapt, learn, and grow in ways that no single species could have conceived. Research facilities across multiple star systems began to adopt their collaborative approach. The most profound changes happened in unexpected ways. Diplomatic negotiations that had been stuck for generations suddenly found new pathways of understanding. Economic systems that had been based on competition began to explore models of mutual growth and support. Some species viewed their partnership with suspicion. Others saw it as a breakthrough that could reshape galactic civilization. Marcus and Zarelin remained focused on the potential for continued discovery. Their personal relationship defied traditional understanding. They were partners, researchers, and something entirely new, a living demonstration of how different intelligences could not just coexist, but create something more powerful together. The Chrysallian civilization began to reconsider its approach to partnerships. No longer was courtship about proving individual worth. It became about exploring collective potential. Other species watched and learned. Humanity, too, began to see itself differently. Marcus became a symbol of human potential, not as a conqueror or a competitor, but as a collaborative explorer of cosmic possibilities. Research facilities across multiple star systems began to create new collaborative models. The rigid boundaries between species started to blur. Intelligence was no longer seen as something confined to individual biological systems, but as a dynamic, collaborative potential. Their first major breakthrough came in understanding dark matter communication. Previous research had failed because each species approached the problem from its own limited perspective. Marcus and Zarelin created a collaborative approach that revealed entire layers of cosmic communication previously invisible to isolated intelligence. Scientific journals struggled to categorize their work. Was it xenobiology, quantum communication, cultural exchange? It was all of these things and something entirely new. As stellar cycles passed, their partnership became a turning point in galactic understanding. They had not just bridged species. They had demonstrated a new way of experiencing intelligence, potential, and connection. The universe watched and learned. Zarlin's crystalline form caught the light of a distant star. Marcus stood beside her, their neural connection a testament to the infinite potential of collaborative intelligence. "Shall we continue?" she asked. Marcus smiled. The journey of discovery was just beginning.